Hey, it's Rob. Welcome to Axel's Garage. All right, we're out here with Amanda's TJ, and like almost every Jeep I've ever owned, right, oil pressure issues when hot. So a while back we did a video changing the oil pressure sending switch, and we figured, it's showing low oil pressure only when it's hot. There's no indication that the oil pressure is actually low. We didn't confirm it was low with a gauge or confirm it was normal with a gauge. I just assumed it's going to be the sending unit because I know it's got oil pressure. Every time when it was hot, she would come to a complete idle at a stoplight or something like that. The oil gauge would go all the way down to 0, and the check gauge's light would come on. But the engine, it sounded fine. There was no knocking. There was no indication that there was actually no oil pressure. And if it wasn't for that gauge or an idiot light, you would have never thought anything was wrong with the car. So we changed the sending unit, and we did a video on it. And if I can, I'll link it up here. And when we changed the sending unit, it went away, but it was short-lived. It only went away for a few months, and then it came back again. And the way I understand these gauges to work now, after 2002, in the Jeeps, their gauges were actually dummy lights, so they would read, say, 40 or whatever it was factory set at. So if it had oil pressure, it was reading there, and if it fell below the critical range, it would read 0. And that critical range, I believe to be 13 or so PSI. And I think these gauges, and I'm not 100% sure, this is a hunch based on all the vehicles we've had and what we've come across. I think what goes on with these is they drop down and kind of show like a gauge, and they're calibrated somehow. But I think when the oil pressure drops off below 13, it just dives down. And if you look at the gauge, and if you have one of these that when it gets hot, it goes down to 0, you notice as it starts to go down, when it hits right around just above, when the needle's just above 10 PSI, it boom, nosedives. So it goes slow, 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 and then boom. So I think that's what happens. It senses that it's below 13 or whatever that factory PSI is set at, the minimum safe low PSI that Chrysler says it should be. And when it hits that point, it nosedives. I don't think this one's having an oil pressure issue either. I think what goes on is just sludge buildup over the course of time. Now this engine's only got 115,000 miles on it. We've had it since around 100,000 miles, and it was neglected prior. We always seem to get these vehicles that were neglected, and this one was neglected pretty good prior. And we've changed the oil pretty regularly. What I did this time was throw some Seafoam in it about 2-3 weeks ago. I put 5 ounces of Seafoam in it, and I told her to drive it, and she's been driving it. Just put a couple 100 miles on it with the Seafoam. So now hopefully that Seafoam loosened up the gunk and the grime, and I just warmed it up, got it up to operating temperature, got the oil good and circulating warm so that we could drain the oil out with the contaminants in it and get a good, clean, fresh oil change. So that's what the first step. That's our first step. We're going to dump this oil that's got the Seafoam in it. Before I dump the oil, though, I should note that the Seafoam, just the Seafoam alone without dumping the oil, did make it a little bit better, because on this warm-up drive that I did, drove around, got up to operating temperature, and I kept stopping and let it go back down to idle to see how low it would go, and it never went to the 0 point where it said check gauges, and that's just adding the Seafoam and driving for a couple 100 miles. Well, we just drained the oil out, gave it a good, a bit of time to get it all out. It was nice and hot. I was very surprised by how dirty the oil was, because when we put the Seafoam in, the oil really didn't look dirty at all. You checked it on the dipstick and it looked like it had just gone through an oil change. And it's a year. This Jeep doesn't get a ton of miles on it, so about every year we change the oil. And let me show you what it looked like. It was clean when I checked it, and that's only a couple 100 miles ago. But now, draining it out, I mean, it's not horrid, but it's a lot dirtier. I don't know if I'm on camera here. It's a lot dirtier than it was when we put that Seafoam in. So with that being the case, I'm convinced that Seafoam does stuff. Now, I've been using Seafoam and Marvel Mystery Oil on and off for decades. I buy, pretty much whatever I find on sale, and it's been Seafoam the last couple of years. I've been seeing a lot more on sale than Marvel Mystery Oil, so I've been using the Seafoam. So the oil got dirtier, 3 weeks driving with the Seafoam in there. I think it helped as far as what it's reading on the gauge when it's hot. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use a little bit better oil. I had been using off-the-shelf store brand oil from Rural King, Harvest King, 1030 basic, you know, cheapo, $1.99 a quart oil. But we're going to use the T5 Rotella in 1030 now, and we're going to put that in there. And we're going with the synthetic blend just because, like I said, we don't put a lot of miles on this Jeep, so it's about a year for every oil change. And we don't even hit 3,000 miles. She puts about 2,000 miles a year total on this thing. And then we're going to also put some Lucas stabilizer because the forums claim that the Lucas might help our situation as well. So we'll have the Rotella 1030 in there, we'll have Lucas stabilizer in there. I'm not going to add Seafoam until next year. So next year it'll be Seafoam, you know, a couple weeks before the oil change, just to clean out anything else. But I think we got a good clean now. We're going to try this, and we're going to go dump this in now. So the Lucas is a quart, like a fifth. So if you got a 5-quart system, which I think these small TJ 2.5s, I don't think they're 6-quart like the 4 liters, I think they're 5 quarts. We'll see. We'll put a quart of this in. We'll top it the rest of the way off with oil and see how much more oil we put in. Lucas is very thick. Well, as it seems, this TJ only takes about 4.5 quarts of oil with the small filter. It's got an odd filter. Something was changed over the years and the regular filter doesn't fit on. So it should be a 5-quart system. It's taking about 4.5 quarts or so. So we got a quart of the Lucas in, 3.5 quarts of the Rotella T5. It's a synthetic blend. We're going to run it. We're going to see how it does. Only time will tell, and we'll get back to you the next time when we get any results out of this. If we get a result in a couple of months and things seem to be better or worse, we'll let you know. Comments, concerns, questions, drop them down below. And as always, thanks for watching.